Hi, everyone. This is Tom Parmalee with funeralvision.com. Joining me today is Nick Allan, the founder of Celebrate Life Company, which is a platform built to support cemeteries and create meaningful experiences for their communities. You can visit the website at celebratelifeco.com. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Tom, thank you for having me on this talk show. Is it a talk show or a podcast? I
I
said
call it a podcast, but you
okay.
can call it a talk show. That makes me sound more important.
Love that. Love that.
So first, Nick, you started Celebrate Life Company. Can you walk me through, when you started the company, and was there a defining moment that led you to launch it?
Yes. So we started again probably like 2-ish years ago now, but I've been doing this full time for a year. And it's been an awesome experience, but the genesis of it, if you will, was I was visiting a cemetery and I had a bad experience. I was looking for a grave and there was no one in the office. There was no information online or like on Find a Grave or anything like that. And I ended up leaving flowers in hand, thinking, there's got to be a better way of doing things. Like, what are we doing here? And, looking into the industry a little bit, I found that there were significant gaps in the market, right? There were cemetery tools that existed, like cemetery management systems, but either they were way too expensive for cemeteries to buy, or, cemeteries were just way too intimidated, or if they did have one, it was never public facing. It was strictly for administrators on the back end. And so that's what kind of started us as a company.
What I love about your company, if you visit the website at celebratelifeco.com, you break out what you do in two different categories for families and for cemeteries. Walk us through that a little bit because I think, some people think, oh, cemetery mapping. Your company's a little bit more than that.
Totally. Yeah. And again, like there was a time where I think cemetery management tools existed and a lot of cemeteries were kind of onboarding them or like using them quite a bit, but there was just no focus on the public. And so being someone that doesn't necessarily come from the industry, as an outsider, if you will, we built this for two audiences. It's the same tool, but families are emphasized and cemeteries are emphasized. Same platform, different value propositions, exactly like that. So families, they get to experience connection and clarity as they're visiting a cemetery and having an experience there. And then cemeteries gain operational efficiency, if you will, plus new revenue streams through our platform.
Walk me through that a little bit. Because if I'm a cemeterian, sometimes I'm thinking, oh, a cemetery mapping company, this is just going to be an expense. But you just touched on something very important. You help add to a company's revenue. Explain that a little bit. How do you help a cemetery generate more revenue through the solutions you provide?
Yeah, so because we have everything digitized with our partner, the cemetery, it creates a way for families to interact in like a more clear way on their phone when they're visiting, or even if they're far. And the way we do that is through e-commerce. So we give cemeteries the opportunity to sell goods and services. Some of our more popular things that our partners sell are headstone cleanings, flowers, holiday decor. Like we've had a big push for wreaths for Christmas these last few months. Sometimes we have that get really into it and they like to sell like a heart for Valentine's Day or a clover for St. Patrick's Day or a flag for Memorial Day, right? And people are dropping these things off anyways. We're giving cemeteries the opportunity for families, especially if they don't live close, to participate, as well as cemeteries to kind of get in on the revenue in that aspect as well.
I suppose a big question you might get a lot from cemeteries is how you handle integration with maybe some other record keeping or mapping systems. Is there, what sort of guidance or what's your answer to that when you get that question?
Yeah, integration is something we're very thoughtful of, because cemeteries, they all are starting in a different place. Some have maps, some are on paper records, some have Excel files, some like everyone's a little bit different in how they're operating. And so what we've created is a way for cemeteries to move at their pace and at their timeline and their terms and do it at a significantly budget-friendly tool as well for them. So what this looks like is we collects their data. They'll send it over to us, and they can hire us to go through and digitize things for them if they don't have it digitized yet. And one big thing that sets us apart from other competitors is we're able to do it remotely, which cuts costs significantly as well. A lot of, other companies will come out and they'll fly a drone and they'll, do like a survey of the land and all that, which is great. But that's a static image. And because we're utilizing Google Maps and Google satellites, it's a dynamic image that's constantly updating. And we're able to literally go through and pinpoint every longitude, latitude of every headstone and correlate the names that are associated and really just build out that robust mapping tool for not only the cemetery to operate, but for the families to locate with their phones the person they're looking for.
Now you started this as a side hustle and now you're doing it full time. Obviously, you're getting some traction there. What are you hearing about the usability of your solution, from cemeteries, from the public? I imagine, you must be hearing some pretty good things for you to be doing this full time now.
Overall, the feedback has been super encouraging, especially around like ease of use for both the staff of a cemetery and the public. Um, for cemetery operators, the most common comment we hear is just a sense of relief. So many cemeteries were pigeonholed and they felt like they were stuck because they couldn't afford a tool. They couldn't digitize a platform to the fact that they were drawing out in Excel a map and like trying to pretty much create a software themselves just in an Excel sheet, right? And so it's been really reassuring being able to give this platform at an affordable price to these small to medium, even large size cemeteries that felt like they were stuck at some point. From the public side, families consistently describe the experience as intuitive. Um, we regularly hear people say, and it's always like a really big compliment for us, is when they say something like, "Why did this exist sooner? Like we've been waiting for this." And that's always really cool to hear as well.
I'm glad you mentioned pricing because I'm sure that's probably one of the primary questions that cemeteries have, especially the smaller cemeteries you mentioned, nonprofits, municipal cemeteries. And I think in our past conversations, you've outlined that you can take a pretty creative approach to pricing to fit everybody's budget. Can you share a little bit about, how you're able to work with folks on pricing and make it possible for them to implement the solution, even if they might not have the biggest budget?
Yeah, and that's really what, again, sets us apart is we can be extremely flexible because of that e-commerce piece. So we've been very intentional of we want to be the solution or be a solution for every single cemetery out there. And if you're a cemetery that in the past you're like, we can't afford this, can't do it, we can make it work because of that e-commerce piece. So typically there's a base software subscription price that varies on the size of cemetery. I'll just throw a number out there that's typically anywhere between 500 to $5,000 a year, right? And then there's a e-commerce aspect where we take typically a percentage of the goods and services that are sold. So if you're a cemetery that's like, we cannot afford a software yearly subscription, and we can then approach and come in and say, actually, you might be able to, right? We'll give it to you at a cheaper price yearly, and then we just take a little bit of a bigger chunk of the e-commerce that's sold to help kind of compensate the cost there. And that opens the doors for a lot of nonprofits. It opens the doors for cemeteries that thought they couldn't afford something. And the cemeteries that can't afford it, they're like, well, we just want a bigger piece of the pie. We don't care how much we're paying for the yearly. and we just want to take, 100% of the e-commerce sold. And to us, we're like, that's great, Well, as long as people are having a better cemetery experience, that's our mission.
Now, I know you're still, sort of in the early phase of your company, but what have you observed with the cemeteries that you're working with so far on that revenue piece? Can you share any general broad statistics in terms of how the solution has impacted that revenue side of the equation for them?
Yeah. On the revenue side, the most immediate impact tends to come from the services that already had demand, but lacked visibility or infrastructure, right? So cemeteries see incremental revenue um, when it comes to things like flowers or memorial items or donations or whatever it may be. But now that it's embedded directly into a visitor experience on our platform, at the moment of intent, it's something that I guess really just it clicks, right? So it's been really cool to see a cemetery that said, like we needed a new lawnmower. We were gonna have to ask for donations. But now with our tool, because we made a few extra $1,000 a year, not only can we buy that new lawnmower, but we also can buy another person or hire someone else to come out and mow the lawn a couple times a year, right? Or something like that. So that's really cool to see. Just broadening the vision of what cemeteries can do, and they used to be so strapped down.
I suspect it's hard to quantify, but I imagine some folks who visit a cemetery and are able to navigate to a loved one's grave and just have a better experience. I'm sure they are much more likely to buy cemetery property themselves and maybe reach out to the cemetery, especially if it's collecting their information and so forth. So, that I suspect that comes into play as well.
Yeah, it's been a cool feature to become kind of like the Zillow, right, or the Redfin of a cemetery where they can filter down to see all the plots that are available for purchase. They can then click on something that they see is like unique or interesting or next to their loved one, and then they can just inquire about it to the office directly from their phone. It's it's interesting to see, at least like not coming from this industry, but just the digital convenience of society now, people expect to have something like this on their phone. And the fact that it hasn't been there for so long and now it's here, um, it feels supernatural. And it feels like something that people have been longing for, even if they didn't know that they wanted this. And then sometimes, cemeteries are apprehensive, like, well, we, want the touch points. We want to talk to people. We want people in the office. That still happens. This is just another lead generator to get people into the office, and the customer feels like they're more in control because they start that solution on their own, and they're way more likely to purchase something. Yeah.
All right, just a couple more questions for you. I did want to ask about this really cool partnership you have with Better Place Forests, which I think most people are familiar with who they are, but you might want to briefly explain who Better Place Forests is
Oh
and,
yeah.
explain how that partnership, shows how you can extend beyond working simply with traditional cemeteries and truly do something creative.
Sure. So I am not a Better Place Forest representative. I'll do my best to try to explain what they do.
Sure.
Um, they are a unique approach to resting places or cemeteries, right? So instead of buying a plot of land and putting headstones in and burials, they go out and either, purchase large acres of forest land, or sometimes it's even donated, or sometimes it's, just worked out. But it's an alternative where instead of someone being buried, they can purchase a tree, and that can either be their individual tree, it can be the family tree, and then they do ash spreadings at that tree. So I love what they're doing. It's really cool. I've been out to one of their sites, and they have a whole trail system. People go out and hike around. People get to, experience um, a final resting place in just a different way. And it's really beautiful what they're doing.
Right. And I guess my last question for you, Nick, is what are some of the biggest objections you get from cemeteries who might not be immediately pulling the trigger in terms of working with you? And, how do you convince those cemetery operators to maybe do something a little bit out of the comfort zone and do something with technology and try out your solution?
Yeah, the biggest challenge hasn't really been technology itself. Really, it's just the change management behind it. Cemeteries, for hundreds or thousands of years have, really been the same thing for a really long time. And I think it's understandable to be cautious of new things that are coming out. And so it's important for us to focus on not being like a disruptor or not being someone that's here to like shake up the industry or anything like that. Really, what we're doing is we just want to be that partner to get them to something digitized. It's really not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we feel like we're the best solution out there to get them to that point. And so I guess when it comes to, I can kind of go back to like Better Place Forests. They had a unique instance because there aren't clear markers out there, right, in a forest. Obviously, there's no headstones or anything like that. So it really challenged us to design something that's intuitive, design something that makes sense, but not be the focus of what that cemetery is, but just a tool that kind of bridges the gap between the two. And so when it comes to, I guess, like you were saying, like the biggest challenges, the change management is just helping people embrace it. And the more, I guess the more conversations we have and the more of a footprint that we have in the industry, the feedback that we're receiving is incredible. And because we have customers that really love the tool and understand that we are a startup, they get to help influence the roadmap. I'm not from this industry. I'm not someone that claims I know everything. So being able to talk to someone that's been in the industry for 50 years and they say, actually, what you want to do is this. And we get to say, that's an incredible thought. And then we go and build it. And it's, building a tool that not only the public likes, but that the cemetery operators love too.
Well, Nick, I think your approach is really refreshing. And I know I have seen a demo of your solution. If you're a funeral home operator out there with a cemetery or a cemeterian, I'm sure Nick would love to walk you through online what the solution is all about and what Celebrate Life Company can offer. Nick, thanks so much for joining me today. Again, you can visit his website at celebratelifeco.com. Any final words, Nick? Any final thoughts?
Again, I really appreciate what you're doing here with Funeral Vision. I think it's really special, and thanks for giving us a voice and helping us, kind of reach the cemeterians out there and even the funeral homes. Another thing I'd just like to quickly mention is I think there's a real opportunity for funeral homes to be more involved with the cemeteries. I'm sure there's multiple funeral homes that have one or two cemeteries in their community that they feel like maybe they have a really good relationship with. And with our tool, I think there's a really cool opportunity to help a cemetery get online by being the underwriters or helping sponsor it. And then it's a win-win-win for everyone. The cemeteries get a tool, the funeral home gets a community visibility as well as a revenue generator for them, and the public benefits from being able to use this tool. So we are exploring new partnerships and new ways of doing this. And again, just thanks for helping us get our name out there as a startup and helping us become more of a voice in the industry.
It was great talking to you, Nick, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you.